Welcome to A Chef's Grimoire, Spring. Today we'll be working with the sun. I like to start all my videos with the 3 lines of the major arcana, simply because it was brought to us by Rachel Pollack, who is a tarot enthusiast and is basically the gold standard in tarot today, because it reflects our conscious being the first line, subconscious being the second line, and the superconscious being the third line. It also takes the Fool out of the actual journey to be placed on their own, off to the side of the 3 lines. Why? Because the Fool takes the journey. It's the Fool who goes through all of these lines to only start again and again and again with every new venture or thought or idea or tangible thing. So, starting here with the majors, we've covered in videos prior to this one all of the cards up until the sun. I also want to say, for those of you that have tuned in just for the cooking aspect, I usually take the first half hour of the video to go through the card itself. The second half of the video, around the half hour mark and onwards, is all about the cooking. So if you wish to skip ahead, I put all the timestamps in the description of the video. So with that, let's move on to the sun page now. So here we are on the sun page, and you'll notice that this part of the page is the depiction from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck that Pamela Colman-Smith has beautifully illustrated. I took liberties to extend the page in all directions to fit on the real estate I have. I also embellished the card a little bit with a bling, which I felt I liked, and was necessary. And the colors may be a little bit different, but all of the actual depictions and symbolism are here from the Rider-Waite-Smith Sun card. Before we get into all of this, I want to continue the Fool's journey. And we do that with every video. We start with the actual journey, which is the story that I've put together for the journey. And then we'll move on to all of the history and symbolism in the card. After more discussion and reassurance, Ruby was able to calm herself and realize that the circumstances are different this time around. She had no job, not due to outside sources, but because she made the choice on her own. And just like the Fool, she was now living life on her terms. With first light of dawn creeping over the ocean's horizon, they woke eager to start the day with the intention to both find jobs before sunset. As the sun started to peak its fiery light above the line of the ocean, they foraged their belongings for the last of their food for breakfast and decent clothing to wear in order to look as polished as they could be. Ruby started to make a list of how to structure the day. "I think we should start at the local library," said Ruby. "We can get a list of all the schools, churches, and daycare places in the area, as well as a list of parks and recreational sites." "That sounds like a great plan, Ruby." The Fool smiled at her, thankful for her organizational skills. The two hopped in the car and began to explore the area. It was bustling enough, but still laid back with an ambiance of a local beach town. They found the library and met the librarian. "The good news is," said the librarian, "we are in need of both those positions you are seeking. I know a small daycare in town. My daughter goes there. They may be looking for someone now that summer has begun. People who live here permanently work most hours when tourist season is upon us. They're always looking for places to keep their kids while at work. Now, as far as the park ranger position, I would imagine you'll need to apply online. You may also need a degree of some sort, but we can check that out on the computer. The librarian was extremely helpful, and as the sun reached the mid-sky, the Fool had applied to 3 state parks, and Ruby had a more targeted list of job sites to visit. Feeling exuberant and optimistic, they decided to visit the first daycare the librarian had mentioned. Just as he said, they were looking for someone to help with the infants early morning to mid-afternoon. Ruby jumped at the opportunity. They next drove to the closest park to inquire in person. The ranger was adamant about applying online, but did say that the pool was hiring lifeguards for the season and maybe to apply there in person while waiting for the other positions to open. By late afternoon, they both had jobs to start on Monday. They celebrated with a dinner of bread and cheese as they watched the sunset over the ocean. So now that we've gone through the Fool's journey continuing, and it continues and continues and continues, but we're going to hold off there to move on to history and symbolism in the card now. And I have a quote to start off from Arthur Edward Waite, who is the creator of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And he says about the Sun card, "When the self-knowing spirit has dawned in the consciousness above the natural mind, that mind, in its renewal, leads forth the animal nature in a state of perfect conformity." Now, what does that mean? That's pretty philosophical, so let's break that down. Now, the card meaning, right? The old card meaning. Again, a quote by Arthur Edward Waite from the Pictorial Key of the Tarot, that's the book he wrote to accompany the cards, states, "The card signifies the transit from the manifest light of the world, represented by the glorious sun of the earth, to the light of the world to come, typified by the heart of a child." In my mind, I'm thinking this is all things that he wrote, and then he passed that on to the illustrator, who is Pamela Coleman Smith, to illustrate all of this. So those two phrases about the sun and about the old card meaning really sums up the picture of the card. Now, in new modern interpretations of the sun card, and this could be any sun card because we have thousands now instead of a handful back in 1909 when this deck was created. The new modern meaning of the card is its association with attained knowledge, the conscious mind prevailing over the fears and illusions of the unconscious, innocence renewed through discovery, bringing hope of the future. It reflects happiness and contentment, vitality, self-confidence, success, illumination of clarity of truth, the transition from darkness to light, and new construction. So those interpretations don't really go too far off from the original meaning of the cards. We can't really talk about the sun card without going back to ancient Greece and their natural interpretations of how things happened in the world. They didn't have computers. They didn't have libraries, really. All they had was nature. And through nature, they, as humans, needed to have concrete ideas of how these things became what they became or got to where they got. So that's where myths come in. And myths were our first libraries, were our first computers. They summed up everything. And the illiterate people would have these stories that they could exchange. and teach their children. This is why the sun rises every day. This is why the moon rises every night. This is why we have grains to feed you, right? This is why we have everything. So there was the sun god, of course, but there were deities for everything tangible or philosophical. And that's how we got to where we are today. So you can't discount the myths. Now, over the course of centuries, many of these myths merged. Many, not all. Some are still in their purest state, but some merged with gods and goddesses taking on positions of different roles. But that said, there are still the true, original gods of that particular source. So we mentioned that with the moon, right? Where there's many moon gods, but only Selene was the true epitome of the moon. That was her only focus, was the moon. And so Selene is the goddess of the moon. When we get to the sun, in our modern day understanding of the myths, we often think of Apollo or Ra as the sun gods. But just like Selene is the epitome of the moon goddess, Helios, who is the Greek god, is the epitome of the sun. Now, Helios is Selene's brother, biologically, according to mythology. So Selene, goddess of the moon, and Helios, god of the sun. Now notice this feminine for the moon and masculine for the sun. Now Helios, he was believed to ride his chariot across the sky from east to west, pulling the sun behind him. To the ancient people, sunrise represented the end of darkness and the arrival of light, a cyclical nature of life, and an order that can be relied upon, which was important back then because there was so much upheaval, right? Every day there was battles. Who was in charge? What laws were being made? What did we need to follow and do next? Like, it was crazy, almost like today. But it was crazy. So having a dependable source that you could rely upon, like the sun and the moon and the stars, that was everything back then. The sun was essential for growth, planting, and harvesting of food, as well as working for wages, all done during the day. The sun's rays are accessible to everyone and can see everything. Therefore, it reveals that which is hidden and enabling us to see, navigate, and understand our surroundings. Now, getting back to Helios, I found this fabulous picture, which this picture is an engraving. It's numbered 44, you'll notice. Sol, meaning the sun, and in Roman numerals, it's 10, 10, 10, 10, 40, plus 4 ones. 44. And it's an engraving that's from the E series of the Taraci de Mantegna from 1465, the year 1465. We still have this. This is truly amazing. Now, these weren't tarot cards, but they were thought to be an upper-class tutorial guide for children, kind of like, remember when we were studying math and you had those stupid cards, you had that like 1 + 1 and 2 + 2. I hated those things. But anyway, that's what these were in 1465. These cards may have inspired the earliest tarot cards because they reflected a world of order prompted by humanism, where aristocracy and the church ranked lower than the arts, sciences, virtues, the planets and spheres. So these were teaching children. So there was a series, And this is numbered 44. So this falls in line with virtues, of course, but also the mythologies, which again in that time were still pretty prominent. And this depicts the Helios riding the chariot with the fiery steeds across the sky. We don't see the sun. It would be back here because they're pulling it across the sky. But we see a child falling from the chariot. Now, what does that mean? So the mythological story of Helios had a son called Phaethon. And there's many stories as to why this happened, and I'm not going to get into those. You could certainly go and research them yourself, but I'm going to go into a very basic story. Phaethon had kept prompting his dad. He wants to drive the chariot. He wants to drive the chariot. And, you know, it was a huge responsibility. It's kind of like taking your kid to Wall Street today and saying, go ahead, kid, figure out what's going on and you know, tell people to buy or sell. I mean, it's that large. So driving the sun across the sky every day takes enormous effort. And so obviously, Dad, Helios, says to his son, Phaethon, no, you cannot do that. Well, he wasn't as strong as he thought, and Phaethon one day convinced his dad to have him take the reins. So the child took the reins, but obviously had lost control within seconds and drove the chariot too high in the sky, hence the world became icy, and then also dipped down too low, hence brought fire and brimstone to the world, burning the earth. Hera, who was the wife of Zeus, saw this happening, and the first thing she can think of was, I need to do something. So she asks a scorpion to go and bite the ankles of Phaethon to distract and or eliminate the kid so that Helios can take the reins again. And that happened, and through that, Phaethon fell from the chariot to his death. But Helios retained the reins of the chariot and continues to this day to pull the sun across the sky from east to west. So that's everything here in the depiction, right? We have the scorpion in the sky and Phaethon falling from the chariot and Helios retaining the reins of the chariot. Now, to a child, what would this mean? Well, it obviously means don't second guess what your parents tell you because there's consequences. So it's virtues, as well as learning a little bit about mythological myth. So it's a dual purpose here. And I love that. I absolutely fell in love with this. I also love the fact that these cards could, and I'm not saying they are, but they could be the creator of the tarot's inspiration for making tarot cards, which really didn't start until the 15th century. So, you know, 1465 was around the time that they were being invented. And they were created as a card game initially for the upper class. And these tutorial engravings were for upper class children. So it just seems like it's the perfect pot for tarot to spring out of or to be created in. So going back to the sun card page, we now know about Helios and his son Phaethon. So the astrological sign for this card, the correspondence of astrology and tarot, is Leo. And Leo's planet that rules that sign is the sun. And it's also the ruler of this card. Now, That's not always the case, right? So if you remember with the moon should be, if you do a exact correspondence between astrology and the moon, it should be Cancer as the ruling sign, but it's Pisces, because the translation of the attributes of Pisces are more fitting to the moon card. This, the Sun, and Leo, perfect. So that's where we get that. And the element for this card is what? Fire. It's just goes hand in hand. So numerology for this card, it's numbered 19. This is the way 19 is depicted in Roman numerals. It's very interesting. It's basically 10 is the X, yes, in Roman numerals. If you don't know, 10 would be the X. So this is 10, and this is 10, but there's 1 in the center. So you take 10 plus 10, which is 20, and you deduct 1. That's why we don't use Roman numerals today. It's so confusing. So the card is numbered 19. And what is 19? Well, if you know anything about numerology, you know that when you get to double digits, you add the 2 digits together to get a single digit. So 1 plus 9 equals 10. 10, as we know in our day and age, is the number of perfection, right? It's the highest attainment. 10, think of 10 getting a score of a 10 in the Olympics, right? You nailed it. So 10 is the completion, it's the well done, it's the pat on the back, it's you've got everything you were looking for in a 10. But it's still a double digit. So we have to break the 10 from 1 plus 0 down to 1. And 1 is a completely different number. 1 in tarot is the magician, if you remember. And the magician is all about alchemy. So the meaning of 1 is about the initial point of contact. The Zohar, meaning splendor or radiance, is a foundational work of the Kabbalistic literature and describes the 1 as when the unknown and unknowns choose to be revealed, it came as 1 point of light. Effectually, the 1 changes the landscape. It alters the entire view of what was before. When we encounter 1s in our lives or in the cards, we're asked to recognize that which sets the fire to burn. 1 is also an indicator of completion, as we talked about with the 10. And even in endings, 1 is changing the landscape of our lives, because as endings approach, we must become aware of a new beginning. As new beginnings arise, the 1 also reminds us to focus, because through concentration we are able to accomplish anything. With a singleness of mind, body, and spirit, there is no end to our potential. In this light, we can identify our objective and see clearly to our prime purpose. And if you remember, that's exactly what Ruby and the Fool did, right? They focused on one thing that day to find jobs. And by sunset, they did. Now, I want to get a little bit into how we got to this card through the centuries, right? So we already talked about Helios and his chariot and the sun falling from the chariot in these cards that are not tarots. They're not tarot cards. They're a tool for learning for children. But going from here to here, they are tarot cards. And these two are from the 15th century, right? These were when tarot was first created as quote unquote a card game. But you can see the influence brought through to the tarot card we're discussing today, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. So in these two 15th century cards, we can see the sun. That has not changed. We could see the horse, right? That was carried over. And it's a pale horse, carried over. We could see the flag flying, also carried over. And the depiction of the dewdrops, right, from the sun, that was all, we'll get into that in a minute, but the dewdrops were very important back in that time. And it goes back to alchemy, which was major influence on the time. So we have to take that into consideration as well. The other thing that carried over into this card is the wall, which we're going to discuss also later when we start to do symbolism. But the wall was carried over from that card as well. So in knowing where we came from, we can go to where we're going. I also want to point out, this is more of an adult riding the horse, but then we have children here, and we've got two of them. They're more or less twins. So it represents duality, right? But the twins back in that day could be the Gemini twins, which is Castor and Pollux. It could also be Cain and Abel. So the meaning of these two children, I mean, the fact that they were children we'll get into, right, with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But the fact that they were twins just represented the duality, right? If you think of Cain and Abel, you think of good and bad, right? Good and evil. You think of the Gemini twins, there was, good and evil there as well. Always, I'm a Gemini, so we're known to have dual personalities, right? We could be happy and go lucky one second, and then angry and nasty the next. I don't think I have those qualities, but that's what a Gemini, the understanding of what that is. So now you understand how things were pulled from different directions, but this is where we are today. So now we're going to get into that. So getting into the symbolism of the card now, we have the gorilla in the room, the sun. The sun is believed to be the emblem of gold in alchemy. Alchemists viewed it as a perfection of creation and attempted to gain the state of completion like the sun in their creations. It also represents the peak of spiritual and human achievement. Spiritually, it symbolizes perfection of mind and body. So Arthur Waite describes the sun in the pictorial key to the tarot as, the sun is that of consciousness in the spirit, the direct as antithesis of the reflected light. So Arthur Waite's words sometimes get a little flowery and a little hard to understand, but as we break down the card, we'll go back to that phrase because I think you'll understand it at that point. The child riding the horse. So again, going back to the pictorial key of the tarot from Arthur Waite, he says, the characteristic type of humanity has become a little child therein. A child in the sense of simplicity and innocence, in the sense of wisdom. In that simplicity, he, meaning the child, bears the seal of nature and art. In that innocence, he, the child, signifies the restored world. Now that's a little easier to understand. So child is all about innocence, right? And seeing, and although you are innocent, you have all the background knowledge to still make concise and clear choices. Like the fool in the journey, right? Because in the beginning, if we go all the way back to card number 0, the fool was carefree. They had no idea what was to come and were just going through life with no direct focus. They were just living life, and life was coming to them instead of them creating it. But now we're at the sun. We're at number 19. So we've gone through a lot. We still retained our innocence, as you can see in the little story we have here. But we're laser focused, and we have background to bring those focuses into tangible reality. So one other photo that I want to show you, I fell in love with this one. It's a medieval photo or engraving. I'm not sure the actual template that it was depicted on, but I found this photo, and this is the solar king and the lunar queen, solar being our conscious and the lunar being our unconsciousness, in a marriage. So it's the marriage, it's the alchemical marriage. Without this, there wouldn't be the child, which we'll get to in a second. So the meaning of all of this is equilibrium between instincts and intellect, which was a phrase that Carl Jung had brought to us. So through the alchemical marriage of the sun and the moon, we get the philosopher's child, which is called Filius Philosophorum. It's a symbol of alchemy. It's the child born from the union of the sun and the moon. Now, why is that important? Well, again, going back to the day and the time that this card was created, alchemy was extremely important. It's the perfect alchemy, right? Two different distinct sources becoming one, or becoming a new thing. Now, the white horse that the child rides, a white horse often symbolizes purity, strength, and freedom. It represents hope and positivity in various cultures and mythologies. But it can also signify, this is where it really rides itself home, is it can also signify spiritual enlightenment and transformation, serving as a powerful totem or a spirit animal. So the whole idea of its being an enlightened animal, and going back to our animal instincts being reined in so that they can be put forth in conformity, as Arthur Waite put it. That is where the white horse comes into play. But today, modern tarot readers would just say, well, it's a symbol of purity, which goes back to the child, which goes back to the sun blazing its rays to get rid of all of the fluff and get to the core of the issue. Now, the red feather, this red feather, if you remember back in the Fool card, the Fool wears a red feather, similar. And then going forth through the tarot to the Death card, the death symbol, or the rider of the pale horse, also has a red feather. And now we're at the Sun card, and we have the same red feather. So it's depicted 3 times throughout the Rider-Waite-Smith deck in certain cards: the Fool, Death, and the Sun. So that is a poignant statement about beginnings with the Fool, endings with Death, and rebirth with the Sun. Red is a symbol for desire, and being on the head is the crown, and it symbolizes a higher state of consciousness. Now, we also have the red banner. The red banner is what Arthur Waite calls the standard, the red standard. And it's a banner. So in my research of banners, in ancient Egypt, red was linked to the life-giving power of the sun. It's a vivid hue and was often associated with blood, making it powerful representation of life and death. So the sun is giving of life. Everything it touches, it brings life to. That said, if it burns too hot, it could also kill. So there's duality in the sun as well. But the red flag is the reminder of it being a life force. Now, red flags were also waved in revolutions. Think about the word revolution also could mean revelation, right? Where you're becoming aware. A revolution is because we become aware of issues and we try to fight them. So it could also mean something to do with that. The wall. So as Arthur Waite points out in the pictorial key to the tarot, he states a walled garden of the sensitive life. That's how he actually puts it into play in that one or two phrases that he talks about the sun card in. So I have some questions about that, right? Number one, has the wall been climbed? Meaning, have they hopped over the wall and now is the wall behind them? Are you now on the other side? Or have you built the wall around you to shield the vulnerable side? When parents put their children to play, it's often putting them in surroundings that are walled, more or less. So at the playground, there may be a fence around the playground. In a playpen, right? It's a enclosed structure on all sides so that the baby or the child can be safe. A sandbox is a box, right? So if you think about that, safe play is done within constraints. Right? Where does that bring us? Well, again, is the wall behind them? Has enlightenment brought them to the point where they can still be innocent and still be enlightened without being within a structure? Or did they build the structure so that they can have all of the vulnerability? The other thing to take into consideration is all chaos we feared during the night with the moon card and the tower card and all of the death card, the darker cards, all that chaos that we feared isn't so chaotic in the light of day. So the wall we built can now be broken free. And in the story, if you remember going out of the moon, Ruby had a panic attack. She had an anxiety attack. She was thinking, I don't have a job. How am I going to eat? How am I going to get by? And then the sun starts to rise. And she is the one that has all of the focus, right? Dead focus on her goal to get a job, which she attains. Representation of the wall, I still find unclear due to my research, but I brought in all of those little nuggets that we can take away and we can decipher for ourselves. What is the wall? Why is it there? Now, lastly, the symbolism here in the card are our beautiful sunflowers. There are 4 of them, and I was looking for reference. Why 4? What does that mean? You know, we could go back to 4 being a number of a structure in numerology, right? It's the foundation that everything is built from. So you can take that into consideration. But more than likely, the card was this wide and the flowers are this huge. So there was probably only room to put 4 flowers. That is the going understanding of why they were there and why there's only 4 of them. Not why they're there, but why there are 4 of them. Now, sunflowers have the uncanny natural instinct to place their face towards the rays of the sun, which is just a crazy, interesting fact about sunflowers. They're known to face the sun. They're a life-giving life from a life force. And what do I mean by that? Well, as a flower, it sprouts to life, right, from seed. And then the rays of the sun produce seeds within the flower that feed the birds and us. So it's a life that gives life. And it wouldn't happen without the sun. So now that we know where our beautiful sun card comes from, its numerology, its history, it's everything I know about the card, I put together a beautiful menu. The menu is, for today, a watermelon gazpacho, cheesy pesto Sunbeam Rolls, and sunflower seed chocolate tart. Let's get cooking. Our mise en place consists of flour, milk, honey, an egg, salted butter, instant dry yeast, and salt. For our pesto, we have fresh basil, lemon juice, olive oil, pecorino romano, toasted pine nuts, salt, and garlic. We also have some provolone cheese and more Parmesan. For our pesto, we're going to use a mini food processor. I like this because it has the reservoir at the top to add the oil. I'm going to add all the basil into the processor, pack it down, add the pine nuts. Now I toasted these in a dry pan, salt, and I chopped up the garlic just to make the machine work less. And I'm only going to add a little bit of the lemon juice. We'll add more later if we need it. Same with the cheese. Only add a little, and we'll add more if we need it. Now pop the top on, and this is where I think this machine shines, right? You can keep the motor running. We're just going to break down all of the dry ingredients. There's only a teeny bit of lemon juice in there to break it down, so we just want to make sure that it's all processed before we start adding the oil. Now we can add the oil to the top while the machine is running, and the machine will do the work of emulsifying the mixture. Now let's taste our work. You always have to taste the pesto. That's why I left a little lemon juice and cheese on the side. But, you know what? It's perfect as is. Now we're going to start our bread. So I have some butter that I melted, and I'm going to add the milk and the honey. We're looking to bring this to 100 degrees, not more and not less. Once it's there, you're going to turn it off, and to a KitchenAid with a dough hook, I'm going to add that mixture, followed by the instant dry yeast. And we're going to bloom this yeast a little bit. So we're going to sprinkle the yeast on top while it's still warm, mix it only to get it incorporated, and then let it sit for about 5 minutes until it starts to foam a little bit. Once that happens, we could start to add our flour while the machine is running on a very low speed. So incorporate all the flour. We're going to add the egg, followed by salt. And we're just going to mix this until it starts to come away from the sides of the bowl. Maybe about 10 minutes. I find that it's a little too sticky after that time, so I added about a 1/4 cup more flour. But you want to be mindful not to add too much. Once the dough is all off the sides of the bowl, you're ready to form it into a ball. And I'm going to oil the bowl. You could wrap it in plastic, but you definitely want it to be supple but not sticky. So I'm just going to oil the bowl that I mixed it in, put it back into that bowl, and let it rise for the first time, covered with a towel. Now once it's risen, you're going to lightly dust your surface that you're going to roll it out on. And then bring the dough onto that pool of flour. It's soft, supple, really, really nice dough. Now, you don't really need a rolling pin. That's how supple it is. But a rolling pin will give you the best results. So form it into a rectangle that's about a 1/2 inch thick. Just like that. Now take that pesto, which I had in the refrigerator while I was rolling out the dough, and spread it all around the dough, leaving a 1-inch border all the way around. Follow that with the provolone cheese and then the pecorino cheese. Now, starting with your thumbs and splaying out your fingers, but also using the palms of your hands, you're going to roll it from the longest side onto itself until you get a nice roll. Just like this. Now I'm going to tuck in the ends and we're going to cut it. Now you could use a knife, but I find the dough being so supple, the knife is just going to squish it down. So this is the secret ingredient. Yep, dental floss. You're going to pull a nice string and I'll show you how you cut it. You bring it in, cross it on itself, and pull. Done. Now the ends are not so pretty, so I'm going to put them aside and bake them separately. But I'm going to show you again how to do it with the dental floss. We're looking for a roll that's about 1.5 inches thick. So move it to where you think it's about 1.5 inches. Cross it on itself and pull. Voila! Now continue in this fashion until all of the rolls are cut. Now you could put them on a sheet tray to bake or into a 8x8 baking pan, but I chose to put them into individual reservoirs of a giant muffin tin, like this. Now you're going to let them rise one more time. So cover them with a damp towel and about 15-20 minutes. While that's happening, let's make our garlic butter to brush on top. A little butter, some salt, and garlic. Now that the rolls have risen the second time, we're going to pop them in the oven. About 350 degrees for between 15 and 20 minutes, or until they're light golden brown on top and feel firm when touched. Here they are, right out of the oven. So we're going to take that garlic butter while they're still hot and brush it over the top. If you wish, you could add a little pesto to this garlic butter too, but that's entirely up to you. Now, when they've cooled a little bit, you can remove them from the form, and there they are, ready to eat. Now for our watermelon gazpacho, I've been using my knife to cut up dates, so I need to get the edge back. I'm using my honer, and I'm going to run it past the honer a few times. Now we're going to break down our vegetables for the gazpacho. So I'm going to take my 2 scallions and take their root ends off, followed by, about the first 3 inches of the stalk ends. And now we want to clean them up. So any dried skins or overly wet skins or anything that's unsightly, just peel it off of the scallion. And that's how we clean them up. You're going to do that with the other scallion as well. And once your scallions are ready to go, we're going to these are very bulbous, so I'm going to cut the bulbs from the stems and I'm going to cut through them lengthwise. Now I'm going to cross-cut those lengthwise cuts. This small chop or dice is going to go into a bowl. I'm making a little salsa of the same vegetables that's going to go on top of the gazpacho, while I'm breaking down the vegetables for the gazpacho. It's just less work you have to do later. Now the rest of the scallion, I'm going to chop and or dice a little more coarsely because it's all going to go into the blender. Once that's done, we have a jalapeno. We're going to do pretty much the same way. I'm going to cut off the top, cross-cut it to 2 sections. Now with peppers, you have to take out the seeds and the ribs, so I'm going to fillet those out. If you have sensitive skin, you might want to wear gloves to do this work. Just make sure all the ribs are taken out. They add to the heat level, so you don't want to overpower the gazpacho with too much spice. Now once you have your pepper clean, I'm going to cut it into long strips. This is called a julienne cut, and I'm going to cross-cut those juliennes. Now working with the cucumber, same thing, cut it in half. And now I'm going to take 1/2 and cut it into a quarter. I'm going to fillet out the seeds of this quarter, cut it in half lengthwise so I have 2 planks, and cut those into long strips and or juliennes, both sides. And now cross-cut those juliennes. And this fine dice is going to go into that bowl with the scallion. The rest of the cucumber we're going to coarsely chop with the seeds for the gazpacho. Now for the tomato, we're going to cut it in half and cut the half in half. Now I'm going to take out the seeds by filleting it out, just like we did the pepper. And take the tip of the knife to remove any extra seeds that are inside the tomato. Now that we have it cleaned, we're going to cross-cut it again into julienne strips. You're getting a pattern here, right? And cross-cut those strips. That's going to go into the bowl that we're making that salsa for the topping. And the rest of the tomato we're going to roughly chop for the blender for the actual soup. I'm leaving the seeds in. Now pepper. The same way that you did the jalapeno, you're going to cut the top off, go around the seeds this time with the knife to get all of the good parts out. And this goes into compost. Now we're going to make our julienne strips and cross-cut them. That goes into the bowl. And the rest of the pepper, coarse chop, goes into the blender. Finally, our watermelon. So I'm going to cut this into manageable pieces. And then once I have that done, I'm just going to take the rind off with my knife. And you're going to inspect all of your pieces, making sure there's no white, only the beautiful color of the watermelon. Now to make the gazpacho, we're going to add all of those chopped up vegetables into a high-speed blender. I have a Vitamix, but you can use any blender that just, does a good job of breaking down or making smoothies or anything like that. Add your olive oil, your basil, and your salt. And we're going to blend this until it's nice and smooth. Now, of course, once it's blended, you gotta taste. So we're going to just make sure our work is the way we want it. I'm thinking it needs more of the red wine vinegar, a little salt, and I'm gonna actually add a little bit of lime juice. It needs a more acidic punch. Mix that up. And with a clean spoon, we're going to taste it again. Perfect. Now let's plate our creation. We have our gazpacho in a bowl, and I'm going to take some of that pesto and thin it out. I'm just adding a little more olive oil, mix it up, and I want it to the consistency so I could drizzle it off the spoon. Now I have fresh thyme from my garden. I'm going to add that to the outer edge of the bowl, and now a drizzle of that basil pesto. It's summer, guys. Well, almost. Right now it's June 12th, and summer solstice is coming up. But we have an 82-degree day outside, beautiful sunshine, and hey, you know what? The time is right for a little gazpacho and all the gifts of summer, right? All the gifts that the sun brings us in summertime. Fresh basil. Whenever I smell basil, I think of summer, even in the dead of winter. And then to that, every time I smell cloves, the spice cloves, I think of Christmas. I think of, snow and Christmas trees and all of that. So our smells bring a whole bunch of internal joy, fear, all of the emotions through our smell. So here it is. This is summer. Summer on a plate. And to that, we're going to taste it. Now, I have in my garden, I am growing lemon thyme. It's my ultimate favorite herb just to work with in summertime, lemon thyme. It's outside of basil, it's amazing. And it just brings a beautiful finish to any dish. So our gazpacho, let's try. Oh yeah. Now, cold soups there's not too many people that like them. But let me tell you, this is like, it's so refreshing. It's like a little bit of dessert from the sweetness of the watermelon, but all the other vegetables balance it out. It's so lovely. Really, if you have never made a cold soup before, try this one. I think you'll be really surprised. It's so refreshing. And you don't have to make it as purified as I did. You could leave it chunky. Oh, to that, I almost forgot. These are those vegetables that we chopped up. More of that basil pesto that I thinned out with a little more olive oil, right? To make it a little more drizzly. And I'm going to take some of that and I'm going to drizzle it over these vegetables. And mix it up. This is like a salsa, yes, to add on top of the gazpacho. So let's see what this does, right? This will give us a little texture. So if we take a little and put it on top, now take a look at that. So now we've got texture in the soup. Let's see how that goes. Delicious. It's all the same flavors, just with a little crunch. So that's the other way to dress this soup up. It's just phenomenal. So easy to throw together. You just need to make sure you have all the ingredients in your fridge ready to go. And when guests come over, you have a really nice dish to serve them. Delicious. Look at how nice they rose. I'm going to take a bite and show you the inside. They're light as a feather. My suggestion is roll the dough out even thinner, and then you'll have more swirls of bread versus pesto. Mine was a little thick, and I also allowed it to rise a lot longer. The original recipe was a 10-minute rise. I did an hour and a half because I needed to do other things. So anyway, it didn't hurt the bread. It didn't overproof in that time, but it just got bigger. So the swirls aren't as prominent as they would be if you only did a 10-minute rise. I'll show you what it looks like inside. Delicious! Light and airy. It's truly a very light bread. Perfect for dipping with this, and I would if I wasn't holding the plate and eating at the same time. But pesto, with a little more pesto in the soup, but the soup has its own flavors. So they complement each other beautifully. Little summer on a plate. Delicious, refreshing. You can be sitting outside in a deck chair, maybe a little umbrella over you, just looking out amongst all of the sunshine. Watermelon gazpacho and our pesto Sunbeam Rolls. Delicious. To make our tart, we first need to make the sunflower seed butter. We're taking sunflower seeds that are roasted but not salted. And again, I'm going to put my mini food processor to work. Now, the whole process is going to take maybe 5 to 6 minutes, and you're going to blend at 1-minute intervals. So the first interval is just the seeds, remember. And you're blending them for about a minute until they're kind of coarse and mealy. Now I'm going to blend them again. And this time, after a minute, you can see the oils are starting to separate and they're getting a little more crumbly. Now we're going to process them again. And this time, they're looking like what we want, a seed butter. But it has a little bit more to go. So I'm going to process them again. And this is what I'm looking for, right there. See how it's smooth? That's what we're looking for. At this point, I'm going to add some brown sugar and some salt. The salt is necessary, the brown sugar is not, but because we're going to be putting it into a sweet tart, I thought I'd add it. Now, the seed butter's done, I put it aside, but I haven't broken down my dates. I didn't get them pitted, so I'm showing you how to pit them. You're going to take your knife, slice through them, and there's a cap at the top of the dates. Some of them have it, some of them don't, but you must remove it because it's hard and it would break a tooth. So once the date is cut in half, I cross-cut and they're ready to go. To make the crust for our tart, we're going to add more of those toasted but not salted sunflower seeds, the dates, sunflower seed butter that we just made, and maple syrup. Whirl it all around until it comes together into a ball, almost like you're making a pâté brisé or a pie crust. Now we're going to take the dough and we're going to place it into the form that you're going to use. Now, I happen to be using these French tart pans, but you can use any form. If it's something that doesn't have a removable bottom, like this, then put a piece of parchment paper down and that way that you can easily take it out of the vessel of choice. So I'm going to take the dough and I'm going to make sure that it's all pressed into the shell, up the sides as well. But you don't want to go too thick with this, right? You want to make sure that it's thin and even on the bottom and on the sides. So take your time here. And once you're happy with your work, pop these in the freezer. To make the filling, we're going to add more of that sunflower seed butter that we made into the food processor. I did not wash the food processor for making the crust. Same food processor. Add your cocoa powder, molasses, salt, coconut milk, maple syrup, and pop your top on. Let the machine do the work. Now, just as we did with our other creations, we're going to taste our work. We're tasting for sweetness, we're tasting for chocolatiness, all that good stuff. Make sure it coats the back of the spoon as it's doing. And you know what? Perfect. So we're going to pour this lovely chocolatey deliciousness into our tart shells, and these need to freeze overnight. You can fill them to the top, just like that. Once they're frozen, you're going to pop them out of their shell, or whatever vessel you chose. And these still have the bottom attached, so I find that an offset spatula helps me get them separated from the bottom. Then we're going to find a beautiful plate. And we're going to put these on the plate. And let's decorate it. So I have these beautiful honeysuckle flowers. Pop them on there. I have some salted sunflower seeds. I'm going to pull the petals off of a dandelion. And I have elderberry flowers. So pretty. Just a very sunburst of color on top of the chocolate tart. The sunflower seeds I used are salted, so they're going to give a little extra salt, which brings out sweetness and sweet things. And I don't have, unfortunately, any sunflowers growing at the moment in my garden. I will, but not now. You don't want to buy store-bought because you don't know where they came from and you don't know how they've been treated. You want to make sure that they're edible. So what I do have growing is those lovely little elderflowers. They've just popped, and honeysuckle and dandelion. So there you go, right? That's what the sun is giving us as a gift right now for edible flowers in my garden. Whatever's in your garden, use to the advantage, yes? Let's dive in. Now, this dessert is best served right out of the freezer, which is beautiful. You can make these really ahead of time. Keep them in the freezer and decorate them just before serving. They're fudgy, and give it a try with a little flour on top. Sunflower prominent. Sunflower seed prominent. The flavor in this dish. The chocolate takes a back seat. If you like sunflower seeds, you're gonna love, love, love this. Very, very good. The texture is really nice, spot on. It's almost like eating an ice cold mousse, because you can see it's super fudgy, and this has only been out of the freezer maybe 8 minutes, 10 minutes max, and it's already starting to melt a little bit. So you got to eat it right out of the freezer, but that's okay because you're going to be serving this on a hot day, so yay. The crust is very chewy, but it's a nice contrast with the fudginess of the filling versus the chewiness. Very full textured base or crust. It's not crispy. It's almost like if you took peanut butter or sunflower seed butter and froze it. It would still be its texture, but more chewy, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's actually just a little different. But I love the contrast. I really like the center fudginess and then the chewiness of the crust. Really nice. The flowers just bring it over the top. It's really good. I love elderflower too. It's so nice. So the longer it sits, right? You don't want to have it sit out of the freezer more than say 15 minutes before serving it. So you have to be kind of fast in your decorations, which is why I just used flowers, threw them on. You don't even have to use flowers. You could just throw some more sunflower seeds on top and call it a day. And, serve this with a little cordial. Very, very nice. Very nice, very welcoming. But the longer it sits, it's going to turn into like ice cream consistency. So that's, and you know what what happens to ice cream in the heat of the summer. It melts a little bit, but it's still creamy and delicious. For a dessert that's a showstopper, that literally took you maybe 10 minutes, blending everything together. You have to wait for it to freeze overnight, but so worth it. So delicious. So the flowers behind me are called sundrops. I believe they're a Texas native, but they are a perennial-ish here in New York. I believe they die and then they reseed themselves. So they're going to come back every year, but not the same flower, which is kind of impressive, isn't it? Flowers are amazing. And we wouldn't have flowers without the sun. So I wanted to film the cap of the video out here in the sunlight, in the garden, so we can appreciate everything that nature has to offer. Because that's really what the card is about, right? The sunshine. It can be harsh. It can shine light in places you really don't want to be exposed. But said and done, once those things are exposed, they're out in the open. You no longer have to hide them. You no longer have to keep them deep within yourself.
It's a release. Many of us that live in seasons, right, where we have winter, spring, summer, and fall, coming out of winter, we're all so happy to see the first crocuses coming out of the ground where the sun is shining on them from the dark, gray gloominess of winter that we've just had 3.5 months of. It's welcoming. The sun is welcoming. And as it just peeks out now behind that cloud and comes forward to shine its rays on us, we feel its heat, we feel its nurturing. And unlike the moon, the sunlight can either burn you or nurture you. So it's one of those things that, unlike moonlight, you need to be mindful of. You need to be mindful of. Do you, is there too much sun in your life? One of the contrasts to the card is that it's Leo energy. So Leos are very proud and very poignant. So are you giving too much of that energy? And where can you scale back a little bit so you don't burn your area around you? So when you get this card in a reading, the sun is one of the better cards in the deck. Not to say that there's bad ones, but there are more challenging cards than this one, certainly. Now it depends on the situation of what's on this side or that side of the card, but the card itself usually means a release, like we said. It could mean brighter days are ahead of you. If you've gone through a challenging time, like the Tower, to the moon, to everything we've just gone through, sunshine is there, sunshine days are ahead. And those are the ones that we always want to have in our future. Now the sun is towards the end of the major arcana, and so we can now, when the light hits us, we can appreciate it so much more because we've gone through so much. We understand so much more. So the enlightening experience we've gone through, and now it's almost like a gift from the universe to be illuminated at this point in time. We're going to move on to the two next cards in the majors, which will close the end of the major arcana, only to recycle itself again and again and again and again. So now we know a little bit more about the Sun card. And many of us knew that it was a good card. You could just tell from the depictions and how bright it is, with lots of yellows and bright, vibrant color. That always indicates it's a quote-unquote positive card in the tarot. So for a beginner, that's a place to start, is just the color symbolism. But I think most of us know when you're talking about the sun, you're talking about bright, clear, and exuberance, and all the things, vitality. With the baby, the baby that we have depicted in the card, there's innocence, right? So, as a human, those are all very good qualities. Good qualities to have, good qualities to want to bring and keep in your persona. So it's a card that we all inspire to. I hope the sun shines down on you and blesses you with all of the love and nurturing that you need to get to the World card, which is only 2 cards away. But remember, once we get there, you start all over again. See you next week.